A man was out hiking, and as he hiked along, he was by himself. He came to a steep area, and unfortunately he lost his footing and he began to fall down into a ravine. Fortunately for him, as he was falling, he was able to grab a hold of a branch. And he hung on and he began to yell, hoping somebody up there would hear him. Help! Help! Help me! Help me! And nothing. And he kept calling, help me, I'm down here, can anybody hear me? And finally he heard a voice. This is God. I've come to help you. Well, and the man said, well, help me get up then. And God said, okay, all you have to do is let go of the rope. The branch, let go of the branch. And the man said, what? Let go of the branch. Trust me. There was a long pause, and the man yelled up, is there anybody else up there? When I lived in north central Pennsylvania, Route 80 was an interstate, or is an interstate, that runs across the northern part of that state all the way across. And I lived close to Route 80, and the local paper reported about a New Jersey woman who was traveling on Route 80, and she really needed to pee. So she stopped along the side of the road, and that's not always the easiest thing to do on a four-lane highway, and she went off into the bushes in order to urinate, and unfortunately she fell down a cliff to her death. How terrible it must have been for her to be falling. Just the fear of falling can be very paralyzing for anyone. It certainly is for me. My daughter is 29 years old now, and when she was 4 years old, we had moved into a new house, and my husband was building a play area for her. It was going to have the swing that she really wanted and the sliding board, which was an absolute must, and there was a rope hanging for her to be able to try to climb, and a platform that would have a roof over the top, so she'd have like a little fort. Well, as he was building this, and he'd gotten to the point of the platform, he enlisted my help to bring up the first wall that he had prefabbed to put in place on the platform. Well, that meant I had to climb the ladder. And on one side of the platform was the hill heading down, and on the other side, it was relatively level. But wow, for me, that was really creeping me out to have to be up that high. I felt so exposed and vulnerable there. Is that what it was like for Abraham and Sarah as they traveled? They were foolishly, it seemed, moving from a land of great plenty, from a city area called Ur, U-R, which is in modern-day Iran. And they were moving to what would look like very much of a desert, Palestine. They didn't know where they were going. Did they feel exposed and vulnerable and out of control? Well, Sarah might have said, tell me again, Abraham, why we are moving? Well, God told me to go. I heard God's voice. You couldn't have waited for another voice? Possibly might have been Sarah's response. To set out on a journey for them was like letting go of that branch. And the author of Hebrews calls it faith. Faith, the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Another biblical translation says faith is the groundwork or the foundation of things that we hope for, and it is the proof of what we cannot see. Now, faith is sometimes described as belief in a supreme being. But one can believe that there is a God that exists without it making a whit of difference in his or her life. So that's not the faith that the author of Hebrews is talking about. Faith can also be defined as accepting as true things that cannot be proven. For instance, ghosts, UFOs, miracles, that there was more than one shooter at the JFK assassination. All of these things take faith, but that's not the faith that the author of Hebrews is talking about either. St. Paul talks about faith in a different way. He says faith puts us into a right relationship with God, so that we see God as a partner with us in life. A relationship is what faith is. Living, dynamic, growing, that then provides us the assurance, the groundwork, and the foundation. This is the faith that the author of Hebrews is talking about. It is a faith that gives us life and gives us hope. One of the most stark institutions in our society today is a prison, where it is so difficult for anyone who is an inmate to have hope. How many of you have seen the movie The Shawshank Redemption? Okay, so a lot of you have. In this film, there are two characters, one named Andy, who was sentenced to life in prison for a murder he had not committed. And Shawshank Prison is in Maine. And he is good friends with Red, a gentleman who was also, I think, in prison for murder. I cannot exactly recall, but they become friends. And Red has been there so long that he doesn't have a lot of hope. And Andy says to him, they can take everything away from you except what's inside. They can't take away hope. But Red was still skeptical because he was turned down time after time after time for parole. And he thought, there is no hope. I'll never get out of here. After 20 years in prison, Andy was able to escape. It was an exciting point in the movie. And then later, Red, who is missing his friend desperately, gets parole. After 40 years in prison, he gets parole. And he's on the outside, and he is not adjusting well. He doesn't like life on the outside. He feels like such a foreigner. He's afraid. And he's actually thinking that of committing another crime so that he'll get sent back to prison. But then he remembers that Andy had said to him, Red, if you ever get out on parole, I want you to go and look for my buried treasure. And Red kind of remembered what Andy had said, and what he did was he thought, I might as well go on this journey. I don't know where I'm going, but he moved out in faith because he trusted his friend Andy. And he got on a bus, which took him into the country someplace, and he got off that bus, seemed like to be the middle of nowhere, and he walked into a field, and he walked past that field, on the edge of it, to a certain grove of trees. And near the one tree, he began to dig. And there, he found Andy's buried treasure. And in it was instructions saying, meet me on the coast, the Pacific coast of Mexico at a certain place. And there was more than enough money in there for Red to be able to make that journey. And indeed he did. He moved out in faith. He let go of that branch because he knew that Andy was trustworthy. And at the end of the movie, they indeed have their reunion. Who is the trustworthy one for you? Is it Jesus, who shows us the utterly trustworthy love of God? Jesus was afraid of falling. We know that. He was afraid to let go of the branch that we call life. We know he was afraid because he prayed with tears before he was arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane. He didn't want to have to let go of that branch. But indeed he did. He let go and he fell into death. And because of that trust, God transformed it into new life, resurrection life. he knew that in his connection with God the Father, the Mother, God the Holy Spirit, then that connection with the Trinity, that was his foundation. And that relationship gave him hope and courage. Now that tree house that I helped my husband with, very interesting thing as we built that. When one wall went up, it wasn't so scary for me to go up there to build the second wall, because somehow that one wall made me feel more secure. 2 walls? A lot easier. 3 walls? Even easier. By the 4th wall, that was no problem at all. And Angie and I used to be up there doing secret and wonderful things as a little girl with her mommy. The more and more solid the foundation became, the less and less vulnerable I felt. God is not more and more solid. God already is our solid foundation. But what becomes more and more solid is our faith, our relationship with God. Now, how does this lesson speak to the people of hope? Wondering whether you will be able to preserve your ministry here in this building, or whether God is leading to something else. Whatever the choice, God is saying, let go of the branch. Trust me. Amen. We need the hymnal? Okay. For our next one. So, find the hymnals. They're underneath the chairs.